Howdy peeps and non-peeps. Stand into the void here once again. Just kind of wanted to give you a little heads up about or a little more about what's going on around here. So this is the corner that I live on. And if you kind of look around, you sort of notice there isn't a whole lot around here. Now, that's my house. And we live on the site of an active quarry in central Texas. Now, one of the things that people like to do in central Texas regarding animals, specifically dogs, is when they no longer can have them for whatever reason, moving, whatever. We're pretty close to Fort Hood, so one of the reasons they can no longer have their dogs is they're getting out of the Army and they can't keep the dog that they've been keeping because they're moving out to civilian life, and probably the first place they're going to go is to an apartment that won't allow them to have animals, pets. Now, most of the dogs that we have are actually from around here. This is the first one right here. His name is Buster. He's actually the dog that was originally owned by the owner's parents. So the people who own the house and the quarry here, their parents, who live that way, had Buster here, and he kind of started hanging around here about the same time we started living here, and he just never left, and we started feeding him. That's going to be a common feed. We feed a lot of these dogs. This is BB. She is actually a drop-off who's been here for a long time. She was mainly one of the main reasons why Buster was coming around here. They would hang out and just kind of do things. They're good friends. She's fixed, he's fixed, so I don't believe they've had any puppies or anything like that. But she's afraid of the dark, and we actually built her the one over here, the brick and metal one. That's the one we built. The other one is a doghouse that we used to have over at my wife's grandmother's house. For a while, my mother-in-law's sister and her 3 kids were living with her sister's boyfriend at my wife's grandmother's house, and they took advantage of her. But they had the wooden house there, the white one, that was for a pit bull named Buddy. Now this here is Dallas. He's our old man. He actually was owned by the aunt of the owner of the house in the quarry. She had 3 dogs, 3 Pyrenees. She had Dallas. She had a girl named Girly, or we called her Girly after a while. And they had a boy named, I think his name was Boy. And Boy was kind of a vicious dog. And we actually found him one day while we were driving up to town. We found him in a pen. He had been shot. So Bud is no longer with us. And Girly had cancer, and she eventually died. So she's no longer in pain. And we actually buried her on the other side where the where the close pole here is. We buried her over here. Okay, I'm going to apologize right now. There's probably going to be some barking, so I may be hard to hear. Also, this wire right here is going to be in the way. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot I can do about that. But this is our pen. We have 8 dogs in 4 pens. 5 pens. I want to start off with this guy right here. The one that's right by the water bucket. His name is Lucky. He is the son of Chloe and Boy. Before Boy got killed, Chloe and him shared some intimacy and they had Lucky. And then we did not do the responsible owner thing by getting them spayed and or neutered. So Lucky and Chloe, when Lucky got big enough, they shared some intimacy and they had 4 puppies that survived. One of which is Runt, who's in the doghouse back there. It's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can call her out. Runt! Come here, girl! There she is. That's Runt, and that's Clemmy right there on the left. Her. They were born at the same time. Now there were 2 others that survived. 2 boys. One we named Spot and one we named Patch. But we gave those 2 away to a guy who was interested in having some Pyrenees for his farm. Now, it's really dark and hard to see, but that is Chloe. And then they, again, we still haven't done the responsible owner thing. And we had these 2, Howie and Gary. And originally they were Mugsy and Capone. And the reason we called them that was because when they were really cute little puppies, they hadn't quite got their dog voices yet, we found out that Howie here would bark trying to get Chloe to feed him, and it sounded kind of like yeah, yeah, yeah. Want to get a close or get another look at Chloe over here. Anyway, and we found out that was Howie, and we thought they sounded like 1920s gangsters, so we thought, you know, we need some like sort of stereotypical gangster names, so we came up with Mugsy and Capone. Now, we called him Capone because he was the smaller one, and we called him Mugsy because he's the bigger one. And we thought, you know, he was the muscle and he was the brains, so there's Mugsy and Capone. And then they had some more puppies, and we were left with the only 2 that survived. Yeah, Chloe's not a real good mom. She suffocates some of them, and she doesn't really get around to feeding them. So the one here, that's LD, and that one's Rocky. And we call him Rocky because we were trying to find names for him, and we just couldn't come up with anything. So one of the things we were trying to do, because there was 2 of them, we were going to do Rocky and Bullwinkle. And then We liked Rocky, but we didn't really like Bullwinkle. So we were going to do Rocky and Sly. And we didn't really like Sly either. And this one here, LD, he's not a really good brother. He gets territorial, and they're separated by a gate there. We can open that. When we feed them, we used to feed LD back there where Rocky is, and Rocky up here where LD is. But what ended up happening is we'd have to separate them. We would tie LD off to a pole over there, and Rocky off to this pole right here. And with leashes. And then what would end up happening is when we would release them, when they were done eating, they would get into fights. And eventually LD here got territorial over the two dog houses back there. And he would lay in front of the dog houses. So Rocky, who likes to be in the doghouse, could not get into him without having to fight LD. And eventually, LD got to the point where he would trap Rocky right there by the water bucket. And Rocky would have to stand in the mud if it rained and just sit there. And it gets kind of cold here in Texas, or in central Texas during the winter. So he would sit there in the cold, in the mud, and we were afraid that he was going to freeze. So eventually we put a stop to that. We put the gate between them, and we decided that was the best way to deal with that. And they've been pretty good since then. Now, the reason these two names have changed to Howie and Gary. Well, Howie there, when he would eat, he used to howl right at the end of eating. He would finish eating and he would just give out this cute little howl. And of course, when he's a puppy, that's really cute. Now, he's kind of stopped doing that, except for the other day he did it for us, but I don't have any proof of that, so. And then Gary, so we call him Howie because it kind of sounds like Howley. And then we call him Gary because my mother-in-law is a fan of SpongeBob SquarePants, and he was really quiet for most of the longest time, which is why we found out that he was Mugsy, and he was Capone, and he was Mugsy. Again, I want to apologize. I know it's dark in here. This is little Kitty. I call her Normal. My mother-in-law calls her Little Kitty. She is a rather small gray tabby cat, but she's fully grown. We've had her for over 5 years now, and we got her when we lived in Colorado. My mother-in-law baited her with tuna, and she kind of stuck around, and just she just became kind of our pet. And I believe you've already been introduced to Smokey. He's my wife's dog. We got him at the Sacramento shelter, and we rescued him. My wife wanted a dog. I was not completely in favor of having a dog, but she talked me into it. When we went down there, we were looking for a small dog. We weren't looking for anything huge. And she saw him, and he looked sickly. We saw his ribs. He looked like he was on the verge of dying. And they have a reservation system where if you like an animal, but you can't get him today, you can put your name on a list. And if in 4 days you can't pick him up, he's off that list. Well, or you're off the list to get him. And when we went there, it was the 4th day. My wife said, "Oh, I want him." And I looked at her, I looked at him, and I was like, "Are you sure?" Because, like I said, he looked sickly. He looked like he was about to die. And she's like, "Yeah, I'm sure." And we let the people who worked there know that we wanted this one, and they decided to take us out to a getting to familiarize yourself with each other cage, where you go in there and you kind of interact with the dog, make sure it's kind of the dog you want. And what's interesting about that one is it was right across some space from the rabies quarantine area. So you have a bunch of dogs who they suspect have rabies barking at you as you're trying to get acquainted with the dog of your dreams. And we stood in there for about 15 minutes or so trying to figure out what exactly it was we were doing in there. And we couldn't figure it out. And so we walked out of there. We took him with us. And we said, yeah, we want him. And they drew up paperwork and we adopted him. But we had to leave him there for a few days so that he could get fixed and chipped and registered. And so we were supposed to pick him up the following Saturday, but they called us the next Wednesday because it was like a Saturday or Sunday that we were there. And they said, "Do you want to get your dog early?" And we're like, "Yeah." So they told us, "Well, then come down here on Wednesday and pick him up." And so we did, and we named him Smokey because at the time we got him, he was mostly gray and black. Now he's kind of still gray and black, but there's a lot more tan in that. He's a Yorkie mix. They didn't even know how old he was, but the vet that we took him to said, yeah, he's probably around 1.5 years. So we've had him for almost 11 years now. So he's probably around 12. And this here is Shasta. Shasta followed my mom home one day from getting the mail because when we lived out in California, our mailbox was down the street. Well, when he first came to, or my mother could not keep another cat. She already had one cat named Jordy, and she brought him to our door. And even though we looked down there, we mistook what he had and thought he was a female for about a year. Till we took him to the vet and they said, "Oh no, he's a fixed male. And he's blind in this eye right here. And he's a really sweet cat. But we think the time that we took figuring out that he was male kind of got to, or went to his head, and we're just glad we named him something sort of gender neutral like Shasta." Now here's the sad part of this whole video. These are mine and my wife's cats. Mine's over here, Strider. My wife's cat is over here. His name was Roman. She called him Baby Boy. Now Strider died a couple years ago from leukemia, and Roman died last year from last September. He died, we assume it was just old age, and Roman went blind right before he died, and it was kind of hard for my wife because she loves her animals. Not only does she love her animals, she's insane about her love for her animals. Now, I don't have any pictures readily of Strider, but these are all Roman. Except that center one right there. I think that's his mom, JJ. But the rest of these are all Roman. He was the Maine Coon gray tabby cat. And he weighed about 20 pounds. Yeah, he was a huge cat.